Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater, and today I'd like to take you on a tour of Wave's LV1 Classic digital mixer. Let's get started. Now, the LV1 series of mixers from Waves has been around for a while, but traditionally it's been a modular system where you had to put things together to create your own system. With the LV1 Classic, it's all self-contained in this one single device. So what we have here is we have a touch screen, we have a control surface, we have I/O, and we have integrated SoundGrid DSP. So the complete functionality that you need for all your mixing is right here, and then the system is easily scalable with more I/O or any SoundGrid devices. A big feature here is the Wave SoundGrid processing. You can run tons of plugins on this. There are 8 insert slots on each channel in the mixer. It comes with 17 permanently licensed plugins that you're going to be using all the time. And then you can add any other SoundGrid compatible plugin. There are 160 or more even available from Waves that you can also add into this, in addition to other software add-ons, as we'll see. We've got very precise 32-bit floating point processing here at up to 96 kilohertz sample rates. And that allows us latencies as low as 0.8 milliseconds. Another beautiful thing about the LV1 Classic mixer is that it's very portable, very compact, weighs just 38 pounds, and even in a road case, you can take this on an airline flight with you. Another hallmark of the LV1 Classic is that it's very intuitive to use. It came out of a software design, so any skill level user will easily be able to find their way around and get right to work mixing sound. So in the mixer, you can have up to 64 channels, and those can be either mono or stereo, so we can actually have 128 sources feeding into this. We've got 44 mix buses in the mixer, and that includes groups, DCAs, matrices. We've also got 24 assignable auxes for monitoring for effects. We've also got 3 master buses, as well as a Q bus. From a hardware standpoint, we have a very responsive 21.5-inch touchscreen. Responds very quickly to your finger. You can also, of course, use the control surface. You can double click to name things. A keyboard pops up here, or you could connect an external keyboard using USB. The touchscreen has a matte finish, which makes it ideal under any lighting condition. You're not going to get reflections off of this. And you can expand the system with a second touchscreen using HDMI and USB. And speaking of expansion, you can also add 2 more hardware controllers to this as well. We have 16+1 master fader here. We also have 16+1 rotary encoders, and those are push to click as well. We've got an array of buttons here on the right side that allow us to quickly move through the different views on the mixer. On the back panel, we have our local I/O, and that allows us to route signals directly in here with no stage boxes. Of course, you can add optional stage boxes as well to expand the I/O. But with the onboard I/O, we have 16 inputs, and those preamps are a ground-up design that Waves worked on with a very well-known console designer to create a very responsive, very articulate, very quiet preamp to get your signals in. Now, if you want to, you can also engage what's called the HMX mode, which will add some of that analog grit back in and give you a little different tone if that's what you want for your signal. We've got 12 outputs on the back panel, and those can feed from any of the buses. Everything is so assignable inside this console, as we'll see. We've also got multiple USB ports. You can connect drives to this. You can record to a drive. You can record up to 16 channels on an external USB drive. You could hook a computer keyboard up to this for naming channels and so on. And then, of course, we also have Ethernet connectors, and those allow us to add external SoundGrid devices. And in this case, I've got Pro Tools running on my MacBook, connected by Ethernet, and that's serving as an additional set of 128 inputs. We'll take a look at that in just a little bit as well. So let's take a quick tour of how you get around on the LV1 Classic. As you'll see, it's very easy to navigate. So we have 2 independent mixers. We have Mixer 1 and we have Mixer 2. In the mixer, we can have up to 64 stereo channels, as I mentioned earlier, and each of those channels has up to 8 effects slots in it that you can also load in plugins. And again, we'll take a look at that. We've got 24 aux sends. Typically, you'd route those, the first 8 to the effects, and 16 for monitor sends as well. And in fact, if you're using in-ear monitors, there's an optional in-ear monitor system that allows you to do an immersive in-ear monitor mix. It's really great on stage because it really opens things up for your performers. So across the top, we can choose our main views. We've got Mixer 1, we've got our second independent mixer, which is Mixer 2. We can look at an overall channel view. We've got our show view, which is where scenes are stored. You can have up to 1,000 scenes here that can be recalled either from here. You could plug in an external device. You could use a MIDI controller, a Stream Deck, whatever you wanted to select those scenes. We've got a patching screen for routing our inputs and outputs. And then we've got a setup screen with some of our basic inventory kinds of things that tell us what we're running in our system. So for example, in this system, I've got the Classic's onboard I/O here. If we had additional I/O boxes, they would show up here as well. In rack B, which is our second set of inputs, we've got local media, and this is where my computer is showing up here. We can have up to 8 servers connected. So we've got the internal DSP server. We could add 3 more DSP servers, and then you can have 4 backups for those first 4 servers as well. And speaking of backups, the system is 100% redundant. There are 2 redundant power supplies on the back, and in fact, it's so well designed that you could cut the power or reboot and audio never stops passing. And finally on this screen, we can see the control options that we have. We've got the built-in fader bank. You can access some of the remote control software. For example, iRemote that runs on a tablet. There's MyMon that runs on an iPhone, and so on. Let's go back to our mixer page. Now on the mixer page, we have a number of different views here as well. So what we're looking at is called the input view. So we can see our digital trim here. If we were using the analog inputs, we'd be able to see the preamp and so on. We can switch to rack, which shows us our 8 plug-in insert slots per channel. We can show the dynamics and EQ that are inserted on each. We've got our effects sends, 8 of those here. Monitor sends 1 through 8, monitor sends 9 through 16. We can look at our routing here as well. So we can show groups, we can show the matrix, left, right, center, and so on. And finally, we can look at the channel overview. Now this allows you to very quickly see what's going on with the channel, but a better option is actually to jump over to the channel. Now here's where we select our input here at the top. Right now we're set to input B, which is feeding from my Pro Tools system running on my MacBook. But if we switch to input A, let's go to the first input here, first channel. Let's go to input A, and now we're looking at the analog input coming in from the external source. Now we're looking at the back panel input. Now we assign that input here. So we're on input A, and we're showing what's feeding where. So mic line 1 is feeding into the first channel, and so on. We can also look at our outputs. So that channel is feeding to output number 1. We have internal routings, device-to-device routings, and so on. But now that we're set here on input A, let's go back to our channel. And here's where we can apply 48-volt phantom power. I've got this Earthworks mic connected here. And we choose where the preamping is coming from. I'm going to choose local. We're going to use the built-in preamp, and again, that's that Wave Design preamp that sounds so great. And now we've got our Earthworks microphone happening here. We've got a trim control, we've got a gain control. We can turn that right on the screen, or we can click and then use the far right knob, make adjustments to that control or any control inside the mixer or plug-in. We've got digital trim, we've got delay, and so on. These are our 8 inserts here, so we can easily add a plug-in. We've got our plug-in list, delay, dynamics, EQ. So we could choose, let's choose mono F6, and that immediately comes up. If we select that, again, we can click and turn, or we can drag. So we can select gain, adjust that with the knob, however you want to work with it. To add additional plugins, we just click on the next slot, open up the plug-in list. Let's say we're going to put a compressor on this. We'll put on a C1 compressor. We can click on the output, and now adjust that here, or again, we can just grab a control and move it up and down as well. Now over here on the right, we can assign this input to a group, to a matrix. We can link it to a DCA. You can see the DCA is sort of the grayed out fader down here, and we'll look at DCAs a little bit later. We've also got mute groups there at the bottom. All right, so let's put this back to B here, input B. I'm going to take those plugins off. We'll remove those. So that's back to our kick drum that's coming in from Pro Tools. Now, if we add a dynamics processor here, let's add in the SSL channel in this case. So we can see this here. We've got our EQ, we've got our expander. We can increase the compression, reduce the threshold, and so on. So all that control is available right there on whatever plugins that we're working with. Then when we pop back to the mixer, it's showing us that we've got this here. The SSL channel is installed. If we touch that, it'll take us right to the plugin. Very easy to navigate. Okay, so let's go back to our input screen here. Now I mentioned these controls here on the lower right side of the mixing control surface. We've got different views here. So this is channels 1 through 16, 17 to 32, 33 to 48, 49 to 64. These are our groups. This is our monitor mixes, our masters. And then at the bottom here, we've got the link DCA. So I've got one DCA set up here that's actually set up for my drum group. So if we go back to my drums here, we can spill that out. You'll see that the DCA is moving that group. You can also do that here. We can easily set up custom layers. Now custom layers allow us to basically show or hide whatever channels, groups, whatever we want to see and create a custom look at that. So we can have a few different ones here. This, for example, just has my effects here, my vocals. This has my horns, this has percussion, and so on. So it's very easy to set up custom. This has just my toms and a matrix, nothing there at all. To add a channel in, we just select a channel. We'll choose our kick drum, and we'll choose our snare. So now I've got a view set up. With just that, we can easily change the order of those if we want. Super intuitive. Basically, you just move things around where you want them. You can touch them, you can copy paste things, very simple to operate. The 16 channel select buttons here at the top duplicate these 16 user buttons here. For example, I've got a couple of things set up here. So one is save session, so I can either select that there, or I can click the user and save session there. I can click down to number 3 and do tap tempo, or I can tap tempo here, or in fact, there's a dedicated tap tempo button here and a tap tempo button up here as well. So multiple places to do pretty much everything you want to do with the LV1 Classic. In addition to those 16 user buttons that are duplicated here, or mirrored here rather, we also have 2 shortcut buttons that are assignable. Pretty much everything is assignable here wherever you want. We can choose to click on pan, and now this functions as a pan control. If we click on gain, this now functions in this case as our trim. If we had a preamp in there, it would be adjusting the gain level. We can also select to edit and so on. So again, lots of different ways you can work either from the control surface or right from the screen of the mixer. There are 3 optional free apps that will interface with the LV1 Classic as well. I mentioned MyMon earlier. That's one that, say, your performer would run on stage that would give them control over their monitor mix. There also is MyFOH, which runs on a tablet, and that allows you independent control over different parameters without affecting what's going on the screen if someone else is mixing on the hardware surface or on the screen itself. And then finally, we have Mix Twin that basically allows your tablet to mirror what's happening here on the screen. And that allows you to access plugins and basically all the parameters, just like you would right on the touchscreen. So among those 3 different optional apps, you can take charge of the LV1 Classic on stage or anywhere in the venue and have complete control over everything you need to create your mix or to make your performers happy. Now, I mentioned how scalable or expandable this system is. We can add up to 14 sound grid devices here, and that can be things like Ionic 16 or Ionic 24 stage boxes for routing more inputs and outputs. We can also add Dante devices, we could add MADI devices, we could add other sound grid devices. You could set this up to be a main console, it could be a broadcast console as well, or a monitor console, so you could set up a whole system based around the LV Classic. Really, it's an ecosystem that allows you to control the audio for all your different destinations from all your different sources. There also is the optional eMo mix that I talked about earlier, which is an immersive mix for your in-ear monitors. A feature that I think is very important is that the free sound grid driver allows you to interface with any computer with an Ethernet port on it. I've got Pro Tools running here, I've mentioned it several times, and we can run up to 128 different channels back and forth into the 64 channels, mono or stereo, inside the LV1 Classic. We can also record 128 tracks back to Pro Tools, and this works great for a virtual sound check source as well. There's an optional Dugan auto mix, so you can have up to 64 channels of auto mix going on inside the LV1 Classic. There's so much more we could talk about with the LV1 Classic. I mean, it does so much, but it's also so easy to configure and to get around on. I basically sat down on this with no manual, was able to route my sources in and out, get the microphone going, get Pro Tools going. I simply installed the free sound grid driver and they saw each other right away. There was nothing to really configure there. Very easy to navigate the control surface, easy to navigate what's going on the screen. The touch screen's very responsive, no reflection problems. I think this is a great solution for so many different mixing environments, whether you're front of house, whether you're monitors, whether you're broadcast, whether you're in the studio for that matter. It makes a great choice because it's so powerful, so easy to use, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. So we can sum this up with sound quality, processing power, portability, expandability, scalability, as well as price point. The LV1 Classic is definitely a winner. Now, if you'd like more information on the LV1 Classic, be sure to head over to Sweetwater.com and check out all the information we have there. Or better yet, contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. They'll be able to go in depth and explain everything you want to know about the LV1 Classic from Waves. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mitch Gallagher.